Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I would like to welcome you all to the next Wasteless World Talks. And today we have a special guest. We have Kunal here, who enjoyed the last discussion and asked to join us. And we have a very special topic as usual today, and this is the identity. And maybe you realize right now why I have covered my eyes. Because for in few years ago or 1 year ago, instead of our eyes, we have covered our mouth and we lost part of our identity. And just now, I'm sure that you feel strange looking at me like that. And I would like to ask the first question, all three of you, and I will start this time with Bill. Bill, what resonates first in your head when I say the word identity?
So this is very personal. This is how I see myself, but also it's perhaps how the image that I want to project to the world that is looking at me. Identity is something that keeps changing. Some part of it keeps changing. It morphs. I think I have a very different identity than when I was 18, perhaps even when I was 40. Um, it's a fascinating word. Thank you for bringing it up.
Kevin, what do you hear in your ears?
First thing I was thinking was that my identity is that I'm Scottish. That was the primary thing that popped into my head. I think, like Bill says, it changes as you get older. In the old days, I would use my job as a way to identify myself. But I don't do that any longer. But we all need a label of some sort or other, and so being Scottish is mine.
And you, Kunal, what is in your head?
Identity is, I think so. For me, it will be more like a physical, signature where I am. Like, for example, if I'm sitting somewhere and I'm sharing my knowledge, so that becomes my, like, for example, in this group of people, I would be like a proud Indian. But if I sit somewhere else, like for example, in so last week we had a conference with all the PhD holders in the university, and I was sitting at a bay where we were initial introducers of technology and social media, and thesis around who created thesis around the initial technological phase, and I was sitting in that bay. So my identity there was so my physical self, what people can see, hear, perceive, is my identity. Michael.
Okay, so it is interesting, but that none of you, and we have exactly the same event a few hours ago, and that none of you mentioned the digital identity. Nine of you mentioned my passport or ID number or IP address or whatever. It's quite interesting. And I would be interested generally to learn why. Because, there was already in the past, there was a trial to identify us by number. They tattoo it on a forearm, and everybody knows of you what I'm speaking about. And just now we are giving identity. If you go to the office or somewhere, they do not look at your face generally, they look at your ID number. So why do you think that the first which came to your mind was not this, but something which is much more personal, which you describe? Bill?
I dislike labels. When you go to a cocktail party and you're meeting usually another guy, and the conversation always goes to, so what do you do? And that's your identity. So your identity is your job. Um, and when you are retired, then your identity must change in some way because you are no longer doing what you did do before your identity has changed. Um, but I don't like labels. I don't like the word retired. I don't like the nationality label. I just don't like labels in general. So when someone asks me who I am, um, I am a father. I'm a husband. Those are labels, but I don't mind those labels. Um, I am a businessman. I tend to look at the future. Um, so that maybe can tell you a little bit about the type of businessman. Um, but I really dislike nationalities because there's both good and bad. And people say I'm American as if that describes everything. Well, it doesn't. There's bad about America, just like there is good about America. And so I don't like to be pigeonholed by some label that other people have a different definition of.
Kevin, why do you think that these giants try to put the identity as a number on us when we are, as you describe it, something very different? Why they use the term identity?
Yeah, it makes their life easier. It makes us controllable. It's in Denmark we have everybody has a number. It's called a CPR number, and it's the first 6 digits are your birthday, and then there's 4 extra digits on top. And that number is used for everything, and it's actually not that sinister. It is actually, because then you can get, health is free. You just need to show your number or give me your number, and so it's actually it's a good number to have, but it's thankfully not a number which is given to businesses. So it's none of their business. They can't use your number. They can't operate their business with your number. Well, they certainly would love to get hold of it, but most of the time it's kept away from them. I think the banking is one of the giants use our number in their system, and that's really, really, really irritating, really annoying.
I know, Kunal, that, and you mentioned before, or I think some of the speakers, that in India you have a one ID number as well, and it was other country was one of the first who introduced it. It was the private. How it's called, please? I do not remember.
Yeah, it's called an Aadhaar number, which is a unique identification. So the entire institution of unique identification started when, I presume so, in 1995 in India, where it was recognized that it is after 1990s. Obviously, the entire population boom in India was really out of control, and government wanted to understand where these people are and what are the services that they have and what do they need. So it was very important for government because so there are various identities in India, right? In terms of you're talking about virtually, giving some numbers to people. So there is an income tax department that gives us a PAN ID, that is permanent account number, and then there is a postal department that gives a postal identification for each person, and then there is a driving license department that gives another identification number. But none of these identification were linked to each other. Like for example, if someone is creating some problem or havoc in driving or traffic conditions, is he penalized in the umbrella? The answer is no. Similarly, the criminal records, and it had a different identification number. So there had to be one umbrella under which all the identification number used to come, and that was been identified as an Aadhaar number. So every Indian today, no matter whether he has a passport or no, it doesn't matter. He needs to have an Aadhaar ID in India to get any kind of services here. Your bank account has to be linked to that. your IT, that is your income tax has to be linked to that, your postal, your driving license, everything. And then these guys, as on the call as well, Dinesh rightly mentioned, there's something that is connected to this Aadhaar, which is a digital locker that is created, where from your birth to your education to everything that you achieve in your life, every data point, every certification is stored, and that is also connected to the Aadhaar. That was so simply made, and it was secure because it is driven and made by the government. So every step that has been taken has taken so much time just to make sure that it is redundant of everything.
Thank you for the answer, because it's quite interesting. We have here 3 countries, and I don't know if you know it, that in my country, this birth number was introduced as one of the first in the world. Generally, it was just shortly after the First World War. So shortly after our country was established in 1918. So it's quite old. It changed only once, because the growing population, so the style changed, but we have a very similar to Denmark generally. There is the 6 digits, and then there is a special number, and it's changed only once after 1948 or 62, something like that. It's connected, but it never reached, and this is interesting, Akunal, it never reached this complexity. Never. Until today, never. Every single department is like Abel described, or even Kevin. So I do understand that the identification by a number is much more easier for computer or for maintenance than identification of a name, because there can be 1 million bills or mice or so, but there is only one number. But still, I struggle to call it the identity, because I am not the number, and I do not want to feel like a number. But it looks like that someone is trying, and there was the term controlling our movement and all what we do. And then it's so easy to erase this number, It just will not be there in the system. So what is the risk of this, losing the identity? What do you think, Bill?
Like you say, I'm not a number. I'm so much different than a number. And if I choose to be the number, that is, if I choose to make my identity what my boss or the government or whoever the giant is, if I choose to be what they want me to be and give up my personal identity, then that's my choice. And I know certainly with bosses, they want you to be the identity that they have in their mind for you. I believe it's probably the same for other giants, whether it be Microsoft or the government or whoever would like you to behave like their concept of you. So I fully agree with the word control.
I think the very similar opinion will came from Kevin, or?
No, it certainly does. And one irritating thing here is that to have a bank account, you must have a personal number given to you by the government. But then the banks start doing the government's control. So they'll ask you questions about, have you got any foreign bank accounts? Have you got this? Have you got this? Have you got this? And this bank is not the government. This bank is a private business which has shareholders who want profit. And I get so infuriated to think that these people have taken on this responsibility, which is nothing but the business of the state. It has nothing to do with a private company. Who I am, what I do, where I do it, that is absolutely private.
Akunal, the introduction of this, let's say the unique number which you introduced, or in India was introduced already so long time ago, how long does it take to the people to get used to it? And do you see any increase in misuse this information, which was just mentioned? Because we discussed it, these numbers or any number, any information collected is information for sale. So
Yeah.
it is. So
Correct. So
have you seen the
there
increase
are a lot of
in India?
walls. Yeah. So there are a lot of walls. Okay. Anything that comes to India as a technology or anything to do with maybe railways or maybe metros or maybe any underground system, it will never be experimented in India unless and until there is some other part where it is successfully working. Okay, like for example, the Hyperloop project, right? Hyperloop project. I know the entire Hyperloop team came in and everything. They wanted to have a Hyperloop to start in India. We have funds. We can just fund a Hyperloop. But our minister asked, "Have you ever done this before?" If the answer is no, it is not coming to India. So because what happens is that whatever problems that may occur, like in Scotland or US or Czech, the problem multiplies by 20 when it comes to India, because that many people are there here, right? So if there is an earthquake and there are 1,000 people dying somewhere around the world, if there is an earthquake, it is similar. Here there are 20,000 people dying. So it's absolutely a number game. So here you want to only implement stuff that has the least chance of anything wrong. So today in fact, Michael, Kevin and Bill, today is the most proudest day in the life of an Indian of this generation, because we landed our lander to moon like an hour before and 1.5 hours before. Okay, and every Indian, no matter where he was still in front of the screen looking at the lander landing on the moon, because Russia wanted to fail us, China wanted to fail us, US wanted to fail us, and what we did, we landed it. And frankly, I'm telling you, the money that has been gone to make this is as cheap, the most cheapest, and this all is happening in India. The technology is cheaper. Data, in fact, the internet cost in India is the cheapest in the world. The reason for all these cheap things in India and why this is progressing so fast is because we never do anything firsthand. It is tried somewhere, it is tested somewhere, let them fail. When they win, we will implement.
It is interesting.
So that's why there's a lot of firewall in terms of, as I said, credit card swiping in the US, US is a major credit player in the entire world. But till today, the PIN and the OTP that is on a one-time password is not practiced in the US. It is practiced in India. Now it's been 10 years. Anyone swipes any card, there is some unique number that comes in. Without my authentication, that transaction doesn't go.
It is very interesting, especially let me congratulate you, because you are right now sitting here with us. It's great. And let me take this away, because why I have it. Generally, it was the professional blindness. It was the reason that people see us right now. You see me with different eyes, and I see you. I saw you before because it's a special textile, but it is something which these discussions should help people to open the eyes, to wake up. And I am really surprised about your explanation that India is not generally the testing ground. India is the implementation ground. So this is maybe why, despite it's generally a few days ago, it's 3 years since I started the Industry 5.0 age in India. Until today, they are speaking about Industry 5.0, but they are not implementing. They waited till European Commission came, introduced, but that was a fake. So unfortunately, waiting in this case make not only India to be the first country in the world to really be wasteless or on the direction. They even implement the fake because it was someone from the West. And here I came to the identity, and Bill mentioned that the identity of country is not his identity. It's not, he's American, of course, but the country has a good and bad things and so on. It's everywhere. It's not dependent on us, generally. It's dependent on many others. So
Yeah.
what do you feel? Is there any identity which a group of people or all people all over the globe can take over and say, okay, I am with that. That's the identity of me, Michael. I will identify myself with this aim. For me, is this wasteless world image.
Yeah.
Is there anything else which can be in this direction, Kevin? What do you think?
I think it'd be nice if we all identified as human beings.
Oh, that's really
lovely. Lovely.
Okay. So, Bill, it was quite a short but very impactful answer. So, what about you? I know you agree with it, but is there anything else which can really put all of us together to find the identity of human across all nations?
So there's a word that keeps coming, trying to fit into a sentence someplace, and that word is judgment. And one of the reasons that we are each careful how we identify ourselves is because of the judgment that's going to come back from other people, I think. So, for example, if I said that I was Russian, so everybody in the room now is thinking something different than what they thought 2 or 3 years ago, perhaps. If I identified as, and so on, because everybody in the room has got their own set of filters, right? So I even hesitate to identify myself as a man, because listeners will say, okay, well, that means, and then they'll apply their own definitions, some of which might not be good. So, however, when we meet someone new, if Kunal and I were to meet and just be chatting, trying to get to know each other, how do we talk to each other if we don't use some of these identifiers? I say I'm a man, I'm American, whatever, and I know that as I say them, that Kunal is using his own filters to try to understand what that means. So I'm fully with Kevin. On my LinkedIn, I changed he, him, the pronouns. I think that's one of the most awful things that we have done in the world lately, because all that does is stratify us. It puts us in little groups. It allows other people to make their judgments about us, and judgment gets in the way. It's a wall. It gets in the way of us truly understanding. So, for anybody who has not heard it, I apologize if I'm repeating myself. In that cocktail party that Kunal and I are in, as we are trying to understand who the other person is, rather than saying, so Kunal, what do you do? Which immediately goes back to how you identify yourself in the work environment. I have started saying, Kunal, what do you enjoy doing? What do you like to do? And all of a sudden, he's answering me by saying, I like to read, I like to water ski, I like, and so on and so on, which actually tells me so much more about Kunal the man, or Kunal the human, than the old question that everybody asks, what do you do?
Lovely. I love this. I mean, if everyone identifies itself, because everyone is so unique. If we are 8 billion people, but all 8 billion. And every time, if you look at the history as well, we were always being tried to categorize ourselves somewhere or the other. Like, for example, zodiac sign, what is your moon sign, what is your sun sign, what is your, what is your birth date and everything. So it's been normal in the entire world. But coming to the wasteless side of, how identity really works, is that I'm 100% sure that the entire identification in India, I mean, giving the categories and identifying which part of, where the people are, has improved efficiency in and being wasteless more in India than anywhere else, because India is massive. I mean, if you look at the length and breadth, you start from mountains, you go to desert. There's no environment or there's no climate that you cannot find in some of the other part in India. There is one place where it has never rained at all, and there is one place where it rains for 25 days a month. So it's impossible, and obviously because of that, the diversity in the wildlife and everything has happened. But I'm telling you right now as well, last 10 years have been such a crucial time in this country, that there are more trees that have been planted in India than there are deforestation happened. And that data was so crucial for, migrating people from one region to another, giving them life to settle. And I gave an example of, LPG cylinders, the gas that they would like to cook. So all these services were not possible if in one dashboard we don't get the data point. But yes, I agree that there is a huge identity theft happening everywhere. I mean, the only plus point about us is that we are so much we have so much thought through the processes of banking, or how credits have to be handled, or how savings have to be managed, that we figured out that there has to be an authentication on every level of transaction, full stop. Even purchasing gold, for example, like I said, purchasing gold for like 200,000 200,000 is worth rupees in Indian rupees. If you want to buy a gold, you need to produce identification, because that will come to your income tax, asset allocation and all that. And dealing this minutely, frankly, so I have always overpaid my tax every year on year. Whenever it is cut through, the taxes, I've always overpaid. And I always consider that as savings. Why? Because at the end of the year, when we file for returns, and when my accountant tells me, you know what, you have paid over, so government is going to give you back, that is a tax-free money coming to my account without I overpaying the tax on that. And this has happened like for till the time I understood the system, and it's been 6 years now that government is paying me back all the expenses that I have done all over the years. And that is, these small things have happened in our lives, because the standard of living often, and we can only talk about people settled in cities and have a Wi-Fi access and everything. The last mile people that do not get any kind of services, any kind of internet connection, any kind of computer related gadgets or mobile phones, if they have started receiving the services, the data, that means it is vulnerable. They can also be open to this entire scam that is identity theft. But is that really happening? The answer is, in terms of the people that are using it, it is happening in a very negligible percentage in our country. Reason? Firewalls.
I just came with, as you speak, I came to one question. We have identification and we have authentication. And it looks like that the digital identity is generally, it has nothing with the real identity itself, as we described at the beginning. It looks like it is an authentication tool for a person or a service or whatever. So my question is why the same term was introduced. You know, Bill and Kevin, I'm sure you know it, and I mentioned it before, when there started the time of photography, the black and white is a very old things. So I read the stories that the people do not want someone take the photograph because they will lose their identity. They lose their soul. I think that was written so by the original American citizens and so on, and many indigenous people generally. So they fear that they will lose their soul. So do you think that it was introduced the same term to confuse the other society, to confuse us, that we should not feel like Mike Rada, I should feel like number 71 or whatever. So what was the reason? Kevin, it's close to you because you work with the governments and the others.
I think that it's depending upon the government, of course, but there are some good governments, thank God. So, of course, it is to make our lives easier with a good government. You know, so in Denmark, it does have a very good government. So it is to make life so much easier. So if you have a problem, you give your number, then your problem will be dealt with by the right people. So it is good. But of course, in a lot of societies, it's easy in a small country of 5 million people to be able to do that. But in bigger countries, you need more control. And more control usually means less freedom, less personal freedom, less privacy even. So the more they know about you, the more you can be controlled. And at the same time, the more they know about you, the more they can help you. So it's a double-edged thing. But I think primarily it is to control us rather than to help us, that they give us an identity, which they control, not we.
What do you think about it, Bill?
So the original question was the identity number that the government gives you is very much different than the identity that we define, how we define ourselves. And when you said that, I suddenly realized that there are additional identities. So, for example, there is a digital twin. Very different from either of the other two, and yet it purports to be identifying everything that you are, but it's very different from how you see yourself, I think, especially to the point where I can change my identity. I no longer want to be someone who is fearful of the government or fearful of some power. So I can change that. I have the ability to change that. But once you have made a digital twin, unless that digital twin is constantly observing me, let's see, you can't. The digital twin can be close behind, but it will never have the power to change itself. The government's identification number, whether it's your birthday and everything else, or whether or not it's tattooed on your arm, and I like that analogy, is frozen in time. You are categorized, you are pigeonholed. They tell you who you are. And so that's the 3 different identities and 3 different characters of each of those identities. There's probably a 4th identity out there. My brain just hasn't thought about it yet. What about you? Do you see a 4th one?
Maybe Kunal can answer. And just let me tell you, we have 4 more minutes left. So Kunal, it will be challenging for you. So the fourth identity, do you came with some?
I think the fourth identity is something that is very, very close to a lot of people, and that is your faith as such, where what do you believe in, as a human being, or where do you want to take this entire country to, and where do you want to take the entire world to, how many people you want to inspire, how many people. I think so that perception should be another fourth identity, which resembles your future progress, which resembles everyone's future progress, and how many people you will be impacting through, like I have one of the targets in my head that I will be, planting at least 10 million trees before I die. And I've already completed more than 450,000 trees that we have planted as a campaign all over India. And it gave me an opportunity to meet a lot of people in ministry of India, Bhutan, Nepal, and people appreciating the fact that we are doing good in terms of replantation rather than deforestation. But I think so this is the fourth identity of every person, that not just your hobbies, but what do you really want to impact in this world, like you do, wasteless world. I really resemble that. If we get there, do that, that's going to be very different than what it is today.
What I have understood from your words, it looks like that the fourth identity is very close to the emotional intelligence, but not of you, but generally of the others, how your work resonates with the others. It will be very hard to explain or find a exact naming for that, I think, but it's a.
So I will call more like a faith. What do you really think that would be this? Like, we are entering into the age of AI, right? We are entering into age where we just type stuff and things are happening. Before we used to hire software developers and everything to do it. Now it's just happening without intervention of anything. Is that something that we really want, or is that just a brainchild of someone?
I can tell for me, it's not for me. Today in the morning offered me for the first time LinkedIn that it will write my post. I rejected, and despite the rejection, in every start of a post is a small sign. Do you want to use AI to help you? Of course not.
Yeah.
I will, if I can, I will switch this small sign, because I do not want this. It's me, Mike Rada. I'm not perfect. I have a mistake, grammar, whatever. But that's me. If it will be everything corrected, if you see all my posts to be correct, it was not me who wrote it.
Yeah. The reason is because LinkedIn is now a property. LinkedIn is a property of Microsoft, and OpenAI is also a property of Microsoft.
Yeah,
so they are just combining everything into one environment.
I know. So I would like to thank you all, because we have less than 1 minute. It was a great talk. Thanks a lot. I wish you all have a nice time, free of waste and wasting in all its forms. Stay safe, free, be human, and be who you are, because this is your identity. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.
Please take care.
Bye-bye.